What will happen during the NBA draft next week? Who will win the Commissioner's Cup final? What happened during the Stanley Cup finals? Who will win the Men's College World Series? Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Ball Talk with Chanel. In this episode, we're going to talk about everything going on in the last week, from the latest trades to the latest news, and even a big time draft that's coming up relatively soon. So, this episode will be split into 4 sections. So the first section will be about everything going on in the NBA. We are in the middle of the NBA Finals, so we will be recapping everything that's happened so far. There's been a big trade that has shocked everyone, so we will be discussing that, as well as providing the latest news and predictions about the NBA draft that's happening this week. In the next section, we will be talking about the WNBA. There has been a current change up in the rankings, so we will be discussing the current rankings as of right now. And then we're going to be talking about all the latest news in the leagues, from the Commissioner's Cup to the latest injury report on Aces star Asia Wilson, and even a scuffle that happened during a particular game. In the next section, we'll be talking about the NHL. In the last week, we have wrapped up the Stanley Cup Finals, so we will be recapping the last couple of games, as well as provide some final thoughts. And then in the last section, we will be talking about college baseball. We are in the middle of the Men's College World Series Finals, so we will be recapping all the games that happened last week, as well as give a little bit of a prediction as to who I think will win the finals and be crowned the national champion. So, with all that being said, let's get started. So, starting with the first section, the NBA. Now, we have had a lot going on in the NBA. We are wrapping up the finals. We've had a trade that happened. We have the draft coming up this week. But before we talk about the trade and the draft, let's talk about what has happened in the finals so far. So, starting with Game 5. The Thunder was leading for the majority of the game, leading by as much as 17 points. The Pacers did try to make a comeback. They actually cut the lead to 4 points at one point, but unfortunately they were not able to complete the comeback. The Thunder ended up winning 120-109 and thereby led the series 3-2. Now, Jalen Williams did come up huge for the Thunder, ending the game with 40 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. And who else came up huge for the Thunder is none other than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who ended the game with 31 points, 2 rebounds, and 10 assists. For the Pacers, Pascal Siakam came up huge for the team, ending the game with 28 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. And TJ McConnell, for someone who was coming off the bench, also had a really good game, ending the game with 18 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. Now moving on to Game 6. Now, no one knew whether Pacers guard Tyrese Haliburton was going to be available to play or not. He did suffer a calf strain in Game 5, and it was the same leg that's been bothering him since Game 2 of this final series. But then, an hour before and at the last minute, it was reported that Haliburton was available to play. And now we get on to the game, and the Pacers absolutely dominated. They were leading by as much as 30 points during the game. The Thunder was able to cut the lead, but unfortunately, they were not able to make the complete comeback. The Pacers ended up winning 108-91, and now the series is tied at 3 apiece. And who came up big for the Pacers in Game 6? None other than Obi Toppin, who ended the game with 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 2 assists. And who else came up huge was Pascal Siakam, who ended the game with 16 points, 13 rebounds, and 3 assists. Now for the Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander also had a really good game, ending the game with 21 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. And Jalen Williams also had a really good game for the Thunder, ending the game with 16 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist. So now we are tied at 3 apiece in the series, and we are heading to Game 7. Now, I have already given my predictions as to who I think is going to win and why in episode 1. So if you want to hear my prediction as well as my reasoning for who I think is going to win, please go check that out. But what I will say is the question that should be on everyone's mind at this point is, who will win Finals MVP? Now, if the Thunder wins Game 7 and they become the NBA champions, I have 99.99999% confidence that Finals MVP will be given to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He has been the biggest contributor for the team, not only during the regular season, but throughout the entire postseason. And he is truly the main reason why the Thunder are as successful as they are. Now, you could make an argument for Jalen Williams. He's had a really great final series. But I think that Shea, especially averaging 20, 30 points a game, that the league is going to look more at him and look more at how much leadership that he has provided, that they're going to give him Finals MVP. Now, if the Pacers win Game 7, that is a little bit of a hard decision to make. Me personally, I think the decision comes down to between Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam. And me personally, I think that if it came down to the wire between those two players, I think the league will give Finals MVP to none other than Pascal Siakam. Pascal has been the most consistent throughout this final series, and he has been a huge contributor to the Pacers' success. Now, this is not to say that Tyrese Halliburton did not contribute whatsoever. I mean, we saw Game 1, how he hit a long two to send the game into overtime. But what I am saying is that Tyrese was not as consistent throughout this finals as Pascal has been. And I think the league is going to look at that and put more emphasis onto that. And that will be the reason why they will give Siakam Finals MVP over Halliburton. But that's just my prediction. Let's see what happens. Now, moving away from the finals, let's talk about a big trade that's happened last week that has really shocked everyone. The Memphis Grizzlies traded shooting guard Desmond Bane to the Orlando Magic in exchange for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Cole Anthony, a 2025 first-round pick, so yes, this year's draft pick, which would be pick number 15, an unprotected 2026 first-round pick, an unprotected 2028 first-round pick, an unprotected 2030 first-round pick, and a lightly protected 2029 first-round pick swap. Now, the reason why this has shocked everyone is because of how much the Magic gave up to get Desmond Bane. To put this into perspective, back in February, when the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers for Anthony Davis, the Mavericks received one first-round pick for Luka. And you're telling me that Desmond Bane is worth 2 players, 4 first-round picks, and a first-round pick swap. That, I think, is what has shocked everyone. So, to get a better understanding of why this trade even happened in the first place, let's look at the trade from both teams' perspective. Now, let's start first with the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, just for context, Desmond Bane did have a pretty solid season, ending the season averaging 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. The Grizzlies did have an okay season. They ended the season with a 48-34 record. They sat 8th in the West. They did make it to the playoffs this year. In the first round, they faced the Oklahoma City Thunder. And yeah, it did not go very well for them. So, it looks like right now the Memphis Grizzlies are at a point where they just need to rebuild the team. And it looks like in order to rebuild the team, of course, you're just going to have to give up some of those players, and Desmond Bane happened to be one of them. Now, it seems like they do want to build this team around Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant, assuming that they do not get traded as well. So, now the Grizzlies are receiving Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony, who are 2 really solid role players that can give you some scoring options. On top of that, they have 4 first-round picks, including this year's first-round pick, which they can use to either trade to get another solid player in the league, or they can use that to draft a solid, good young player and really build that young core for Memphis. So from the Memphis Grizzlies perspective, I understand why the trade was done. Now let's look at this from the Orlando Magic's perspective. They did end the season with an even 41-41 record. They did sit 7th in the East. They did also make it to the playoffs, and their first round was against the Boston Celtics. And yeah, that did not go very well for them. Now, what I will say about the Orlando Magic is that they did deal with some injuries throughout the season. Franz Wagner is currently out with a torn ACL injury. Paolo Banchero also went out with an injury. Jalen Suggs hurt his knee. So they've been dealing with such injuries that really hindered their success for the season and even in the playoffs. Now, obtaining Desmond Bane would add another scoring option for the team. He can go and help out Jalen Suggs. He can help out Paolo Banchero. Franz Wagner, of course, when he gets back. He provides that extra scoring option while also giving you some defense. So, from the Magic's perspective, I guess I understand why that trade was made, but I still feel that they have given up a lot. So, let's see what happens. Maybe Desmond Bane will be the key to their success in the playoffs. Maybe, who knows? Let's just see exactly what happens. Now, before we move on to the next section, let's talk about the NBA draft that is happening this week. Now, of course, the Mavericks still have the number 1 overall pick, and right now it is undisputed that Duke star Cooper Flagg is that number 1 pick. He will be a Maverick. Now, the San Antonio Spurs has the number 2 pick, and as of right now, it is undisputed that Rutgers star Dylan Harper is that number 2 pick. He will be a Spur. Now, the 76ers have the number 3 pick. And from the number 3 pick on is where the draft gets interesting. We have seen a lot of changes in the mock drafts as to who exactly will pick up who. So I want to discuss one player that will be interesting during the draft, as well as one team and what they decide to do. So for the one player I want to talk about is Ace Bailey. Now, during the regular season for college basketball and immediately after the national championship game, Ace Bailey in everyone's mock draft is the number 3 pick. And who could blame them, okay? Ace Bailey is a top talent in the draft. He is a 6'10", athletic, versatile player that provides a defensive presence. So, yes, you would understand why Ace Bailey would go at number 3. But recent reports have said that Ace Bailey has been declining individual workouts with teams. He did accept a workout with the 76ers, but then ultimately canceled as of Friday. So right now, the mock drafts are showing that the 76ers, with the number 3 pick, would pick up VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, and that Ace Bailey would not be drafted until the number 6, which is the Washington Wizards, or the number 7 pick, which is the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, I hate to put it like this, but quite frankly, it needs to be said, Ace Bailey is going to get the Shedeur Sanders treatment. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Shedeur Sanders and what happened during the NFL draft. Long story short, he was projected to be drafted in either the 2nd round or even the 3rd round, and he did not get drafted until the 5th round. Ultimately, Ace Bailey getting dropped from the 3rd overall pick to the number 6 or number 7 is the NBA's version of getting the Shedeur Sanders treatment. Because, I'm sorry, you cannot tell me that Ace Bailey is not a top 4, maybe top 5 pick. So him dropping already, and we are still about a few days before the draft even begins, indicates that there could be a possibility that Ace Bailey would then drop even lower. And so I'm just putting it out there. I think Ace Bailey will unfortunately get the Shedeur Sanders treatment because he declined individual workouts. But of course, we're not going to know until draft day actually comes. So let's just hope that doesn't happen. And now, moving away from the player, the one team I want to talk about are the Washington Wizards. Now, the Wizards have been one of the worst performing teams in the league for the past few years. And so now this year, they have the number 6 pick and they have the number 18 pick. And they also have a 2nd round pick. I think that they need to rebuild that team again. I don't care that they gutted their roster 2 years ago. They need to do something. Because right now, the players that they currently have are not going to be able to make the Wizards competitive in the Eastern Conference. Okay? Jordan Poole is not going to be that guy. He can be someone that comes off the bench. He can definitely be someone that gives you quality scoring and quality playmaking while he is being substituted in. But he cannot be your number 1 scoring option. Okay? Richaun Holmes cannot be your option right now. Tristan Vucevic cannot be your option right now. They need to just restart. Okay? If I was them, at number 6, if Ace Bailey is still available, I would absolutely pick up Ace Bailey. Absolutely, absolutely. But if he does get picked up by the 76ers, then I would say to pick up whoever is the next best available. Whether it's VJ Edgecombe, Colin Knippel, whoever it may be, pick them up. Now they also have the number 18 pick, like I mentioned before. Now, I've seen some mock drafts that said that the Washington Wizards should pick up Austin Newell from Georgia. But quite frankly, they have enough forwards. Like, I have never seen a team with so many forwards in my life. So I think what they should do is pick up a point guard. Whether it is Walter Clayton Jr. or the likes, whoever it may be, they need to pick up a point guard. I think if you have someone like Ace Bailey and then someone like Walter Clayton Jr. in the backcourt, and then use your second round pick as a means of picking up a big, then you'll be golden. You would absolutely be golden. Because right now, the team that you have is just not going to cut it. Like, I hate to break it down to you. So let's see exactly what the Wizards decide to do ahead of the draft and during the NBA draft. So, keeping on the conversation about basketball, let's move on to the WNBA. So, like I've mentioned before, there's been a current change up in the rankings. We have the Commissioner's Cup. We've had a fight that's happened. We've had an injury report. So, before we talk about all of that, let's just discuss the current rankings as of right now. So, the Minnesota Lynx did jump the New York Liberty and are the top team in the league with an 11-1 record. They were handed their first loss last week against the Seattle Storm, who won 94-84. Now, after that loss, they did have 2 consecutive wins. Their first one being against the LA Sparks, 101-78, and their second one being against the Las Vegas Aces, 76-62. Now, right underneath the Minnesota Lynx are the New York Liberty, who are second in the league with a 10-2 record. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever handed the Liberty their first loss, winning 102-88. The Liberty did bounce back from that loss with a win against the Atlanta Dream, winning 86-81. And then the Liberty were handed their second loss against the Phoenix Mercury, losing 89-81. Speaking of the Mercury, who are right underneath the New York Liberty and are third in the league, are the Phoenix Mercury with a 10-4 record. Now they are on a 4-game win streak. They have won against the Dallas Wings, 93-80. They won against the Las Vegas Aces, 76-70. They won against the Connecticut Sun, 83-75. And they had their win against the New York Liberty, like I mentioned before. So those are all the teams that are at the top of the league. Now let's talk about the teams that are at the bottom of the league. The Chicago Sky continue to struggle with a 3-8 record, and they are 1-3 in their last 4 games. They have lost to the New York Liberty 85-66, and they have lost to the Atlanta Dream 88-70. Now, they did secure a win against the Connecticut Sun, winning 78-66, but then they lost to the Washington Mystics 79-72. Speaking of the Connecticut Sun, they are also struggling right now this season, ranked right underneath with a 2-10 record. They have lost their last 4 games, losing against the Washington Mystics 104-67, the Chicago Sky, like I just mentioned before, the Fever 88-71, and the Mercury 83-75. And then at the very bottom of the league are the Dallas Wings with a 2-11 record. They are 1-3 in their last 4 games. They have lost against the Minnesota Lynx 81-65. They lost against the Phoenix Mercury 93-80. And the Las Vegas Aces 88-84. Now they did secure a win against the Golden State Valkyries, winning 80-71. So hopefully this is a turning point for the Wings. So that is the current rankings as of right now. Now let's talk about the Commissioner's Cup. With the Lynx's win against the Aces and the Fever's win against the Sun, the Lynx and the Fever will be facing each other in the Commissioner's Cup final set for July 1st. Now the big question, of course, is who exactly is going to win? Now, I think the Lynx are going to win, but don't get me wrong, I do not think this is going to be a blowout. In fact, I do think that this is going to be a very, very close game. I wouldn't be shocked if this game went into overtime. And the reason why I think that this is going to be a close game is because nobody on the Fever will be able to stop Napheesa Collier. Now, Napheesa is one of the most dominant players in the league, and of course you can see that with her averaging 24 points and 9 rebounds. Now, when they do face each other, more than likely Aaliyah Boston is going to be matched up against Collier, and unfortunately, I do think Aaliyah is going to struggle. And I think what the Fever are going to do is they're going to use a player such as Natasha Howard to double Napheesa and really slow down her offensive game. Now, the only thing about doubling Napheesa is that this opens up other players such as Courtney Williams or Kayla McBride to also get some open looks and potentially have such a big game. Now, people could argue that Caitlin Clark is going to have a great game, that she could absolutely go off. And I'm not going to knock that. That could absolutely be a possibility. We just saw her drop 32 points in her first game back after suffering a quad injury. But what I will say, though, is that something that the league is picking up from last season even to this season, and what all teams are starting to do, is that they are doubling, even tripling Caitlin Clark to slow down her offensive game. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Lynx decide to do that. Now, of course, who can blame Caitlin? She is going to struggle. That's just naturally what happens when you have 2 or 3 people on you. But with her struggling offensively, I do not think that there will be another player on the team that will be able to take over for Caitlin offensively. Not even Aaliyah Boston, not Lexi Hull, not Sophie Cunningham, none of them. I do not think that they'll be able to take over for Caitlin Clark. However, I think if Napheesa Collier does get doubled, I think that Courtney Williams or Kayla McBride or even Satu Sabali, if she starts in the game, or somebody else like that, would be able to temporarily take over for Napheesa. So I do think that the Lynx are going to win, like I said, but I do think this is going to be a very close game, and it's going to be very, very exciting to watch. Now, before we move on to the next section, I want to talk about 2 more things that's happened. First thing I want to talk about is the latest report on Aces star A'ja Wilson. Now, she did go out last week against the Washington Mystics with a head injury. It was later reported that she would be out for some time with a concussion. Now, A'ja Wilson is the leader for that team. She leads in all stats for the Aces, and she really provides that veteran, that leadership that the Aces need. So with A'ja Wilson being out, let's see if the team is still able to keep it together, if someone like Jackie Young is able to take over while A'ja is out. I have some faith that the Aces will be perfectly fine, but let's just see. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the major fights that's happened during the Fever Sun game. So let's talk about it. So let's start first with the third quarter. As Sun player JC Sheldon is guarding Fever player Caitlin Clark, she pokes Caitlin in the eye, which causes Caitlin to shove her. Now, Marina Mabry, who also plays for the Sun, came over and forcefully bumped Clark to the ground. That caused a huge altercation. Everyone received a flagrant 1 foul. And then, with 46 seconds left of the game, Sophie Cunningham committed a hard foul against JC Sheldon, which resulted in a huge altercation. The fight escalated to the point that teammates, coaches, and even security had to all get involved so that way they can de-escalate the situation. JC Sheldon, Sophie Cunningham, and even JC's teammate Lindsay Allen all received flagrant 2 fouls, and they were all ejected from the game. Now, I have seen a lot of commentary about this and people saying, oh, I don't understand why there are so many fights. I don't understand what's going on, and people just complaining in general. But what I will remind people is pre-Caitlin Clark entering the league, what did people complain about before? The WNBA is so boring. The WNBA players can't play basketball whatsoever. The WNBA doesn't have a lot of fights. Even to the point that people have suggested, why can't there be more fights? Why can't they fight every quarter so that way it becomes entertaining? And so now that there are fights and there are a lot more fights happening, now people are all of a sudden upset. So I'm not quite understanding what the issue is now. You are so upset that people here are fighting, but you have no issue when it's the NBA and there's a huge fight going on. So just wanted to point out the hypocrisy between people in general, especially when it comes to the WNBA. Before we continue, please be sure to check out all of my social media, my TikTok, my Instagram, my Facebook, my Snapchat, my X account, my Threads account are all at Ball Talk with Chanel. If you are listening to this on Spotify, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Please be sure to follow this page so you do not miss a single episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit the like button, turn on notifications, and subscribe so you do not miss a single episode. Now, back to the episode. Now let's move on to the next section, which is all about the NHL. We did wrap up the Stanley Cup Finals last week, like I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, so let's recap what exactly has happened. So, starting with Game 5. At this point, the series is tied at 2 apiece. In Game 5, the Panthers came marching in and completely dominated, winning 5-2. Brad Marchand led the way for the Panthers with 2 goals. But the Panthers also received help from Eetu Luostarinen and Sam Bennett, who each scored 1 goal. And even though Connor McDavid and Corey Perry scored a goal each for the Oilers, it just simply was not enough. And then we move on to Game 6, and this is where the Panthers officially ended the season. The Panthers completely dominated, and they ended up winning Game 6 5-1. Sam Reinhart led the way for the Panthers with a massive 4 goals. But the Panthers also received help from Sergei Bobrovsky, who had 28 saves, and Matthew Catchup, who had a goal scored. Sam Bennett won the Conn Smythe Award, and the Florida Panthers are back-to-back Stanley Cup winners. Now, 2 things just about this finals series. First off, you just saw how purely aggressive and dominant the Panthers were throughout this entire final series. From the face-off in the first period, they were immediately aggressive, trying to score so many goals. So I think that aggression really has helped the Panthers secure the win. Now, the Oilers did fight their way through, but ultimately that aggression that the Panthers were putting on them, as well as the pressure that they were putting on them, the Oilers ultimately could not handle it. And the second thing I want to say is that Connor McDavid, I hate to break it, kind of disappeared during the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, of course, I was a little disappointed, and the reason why is because everyone is looking up to him. Now, this is not me saying that the Oilers' loss against the Panthers was all McDavid's fault, because no, that would be absolutely ridiculous. But what I am saying, though, is that Connor McDavid is the best player on the Oilers. He is the player that everyone who is watching hockey is focusing on, especially with the Oilers' loss against the Panthers last year. So everyone this year is looking at Connor being like, okay, what are you going to do this year? And quite frankly, he kind of disappeared. Now, I don't know if his performance or lack thereof is because of the lower body injury that he had back in March. I don't know if his lower body is still bothering him and he's just trying to play through, and that's why we didn't see the Connor McDavid that we are used to seeing. But fundamentally, he needs to show up when the team is struggling. And that was the opportunity for him to show up, and fundamentally he did not. So hopefully, of course, if his lower body is still bothering him, hopefully, of course, he is still be able to rehab and get better before the next season. And then hopefully this serves as a reminder, as a learning point for him and for the team in general, which is that if the team is struggling, you need to step up. You need to be that go-to guy. And so ultimately, this was such an exciting series. It was such a great series, and I cannot wait for next season. So now let's move on to the last section of this episode, which is all about college baseball. We are in the middle of the Men's College World Series final, so let's recap what has happened in the last week for the 2 teams facing each other. So we have 13 seed Coastal Carolina, who are in the College World Series for the first time since 2016 when they won the national championship. They have had such a great season. They won 56 games this season, which shatters the program's record of 55 that was set back in 2016. And on top of that, they're on a 26-win streak, which is the longest for a team in the College World Series ever. So you can see that they have had such a great and crazy season. Now, last week they did face 8 seed Oregon State. And look, Coastal Carolina came out the gate swinging, literally. They had 3 runs in the first inning. Oregon State did score a run in the third inning to try to make a comeback, but Coastal Carolina scored 2 runs at the top of the fourth inning to make the score 5-1. And then at the top of the fifth inning, Coastal Carolina scored another run to make it 6-1. And at the bottom of the ninth, Oregon State scored another run, but ultimately they fell short. So Coastal Carolina ended up winning 6-2, and they were moving on. And then they faced Louisville. Now, in their game against Louisville, Coastal Carolina came out the gate swinging again. They had 6 runs in the first inning. Now, there was no scoring from either team until the fifth inning when Coastal Carolina scored another 2 runs, making the score 8-0. Now, at the top of the sixth inning, Louisville did try to make a comeback, scoring 3 runs. But then at the bottom of the sixth inning, Coastal Carolina scored another 2 runs, thereby making the score 10-3. And then at the bottom of the eighth inning, Coastal Carolina scored another run, making the score 11-3, and that ended the scoring for both teams. So, Coastal Carolina dominated against Louisville, winning 11-3, and they were heading to the championship final series. And now let's look at 6th seed LSU, who last time they were in the College World Series was in 2023 when they won the national championship. They did end the season with a 46-15 record, so you can see they had a really, really good record. Now, they did face 3 seed Arkansas. In the second inning, LSU scored 3 runs, and Arkansas was not able to respond. In the sixth inning, Arkansas was able to score a run, but then LSU ended up scoring another run in the eighth inning, and that ended the scoring for both teams. LSU ended up winning 4-1, and they were moving on. And then they faced UCLA, where it was a back and forth. In the first inning, UCLA started out scoring 3 runs, and then LSU responded at the bottom of the first inning with 4 runs scored. In the third inning, LSU scored another run, and then in the fourth inning, LSU scored another 2 runs. So, at this point, the score is 7-3 LSU. LSU scored a run in the 7th inning, and UCLA responded in the 8th inning with 2 runs scored, thereby making the score 8-5. LSU then scored another run in the 8th inning, and that ended the scoring for both teams. LSU ended up winning 9-5, and they were moving on. They had to face Arkansas again, and they made a serious comeback. Arkansas scored the first run of the game in the 4th inning, and then in the 6th inning, LSU scored 2 runs. And then at the top of the 8th inning, Arkansas scored 2 runs, and at the bottom of the 8th inning, LSU scored 1 run. So at this point, the score was tied at 3 apiece. And then at the top of the 9th inning, Arkansas scored 2 runs to make the score 5-3 Arkansas. And then at the bottom of the 9th inning, due in large part to Arkansas making a lot of errors on the field, LSU scored 3 runs to end up winning 6-5 and are therefore advancing to the championship finals series. So we have 6 seed LSU playing against 13 seed Coastal Carolina in the finals series. Now, I'm sure everyone was shocked that Coastal Carolina made it this far. Coastal Carolina is truly a Cinderella story, especially after upsetting teams such as 4 seed Auburn and 8 seed Oregon State. But look, they did fight their way through to the final series, but they're going to have a hard time against LSU. LSU is a very, very strong team. They have been one of the strongest teams in the country for this season. So, although I do think that it's going to go all 3 games, I think LSU is ultimately going to win. I think that Coastal Carolina is going to try to fight, and I do think they're going to take a game. But ultimately, I think LSU is going to be the ones who are going to be crowned the national champions. And so that's just my predictions. Let's just see exactly what happens. So that is all for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time so you can stay all caught up in sports. See you next week. Bye.